Laudato simi, Signore, per sora nostra morte corporale, dalla quale null'uomo uiuente può scappare. Guai a quelli che morranno nelle peccata mortali. Beati quelli che truaranno nelle tue sanctissime volontati, che alla morte secunda non farà male.
In the 1920s, when the fascist Italian regime was beginning to reach the height of its popularity and power, the outspoken historian Gaetano Salvemini sat down with an apparent representative of the regime named Lauro De Bosis. Lauro was an Olympic silver medalist in poetry, secretary of the Italian-American Society, and was a professor at Harvard University. Although initially meaning to be combative and pressing against Lauro, Salvemini soon became charmed by this man's personality, which seemed to soar with intangible wings, and who seemed to be surreptitiously undermining the regime he was said to be upholding. At the conclusion of the interview, Lauro asked him a peculiar hypothetical. He asked what Salvemini would think if a plane flew over Rome to incite Italians to put an end to their present state of shame. Salvemini said that although he would not encourage something that he could not do, he would applaud the venture with his whole heart, and that it was technically possible. "It is possible," replied Lauro De Bosis. Ciao aviatori, this is Poetry Taught Poorly, where we teach you everything around poetry, on poetry, in poetry, albeit poorly. Today we'll be talking about a poet who stood up against a dictator, who became the Sky King himself. A poet whose beauty extended beyond his poetic works into action, which included running an underground movement as well as being the first person to invade Rome by air. We are going to look at the final yet beautiful flight of the poet Lauro De Bosis.
Certo, è proprio un film tremendo.
Senti, Marco, rientra in aeronautica. Ora come ora, con il nostro potere, in qualche modo faremmo.
Piuttosto che diventare un fascista, meglio essere un maiale.
In 1901, Lauro De Bosis was born on Italian soil from an American mother and an Italian poet father. And Lauro himself, through this upbringing, became quite the Renaissance man. He sought to understand humanity in all of its aspects, which for him included the study of chemistry, philosophy, and poetry. Lauro grew up in Rome, which was known for opera, arts, architecture, and famous noodles such as spaghetti, fettuccine, linguine, and the most infamous noodle of all, Mussolini. As a young man, Lauro witnessed the fast rise of fascism within his country, and initially looked at it with passive approval.
Sometimes may be good.
At that time, many patriotic young men, who fearing the stagnation and chaos that was brought by Italy's mismanagement during World War I, and fearing the rising communist strength in the East, many saw fascism as a hope, as a way to bring back the great Italy of old during the Risorgimento. Before we move further, I think it is important that we have a firm understanding to what fascism really means. Fascism is a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and by forcible suppression of opposition. At the core of fascism is loyalty to tribe, ethnic identity, religion, tradition, or in a word, nation. Lauro's hopes for fascism soon faded as he saw the methods that the fascist government employed, the restrictions of public freedoms and the abuse of human rights. Italians were deported without trial, total prison times were reaching into the thousands of years, and cloaked hitmen were soon deployed to harass, beat, and kill dissidents.
I'll tell you what it is. It's anti-Italian discrimination.
The final straw for Lauro was the assassination of Giacomo Matteoti, a socialist politician whose party was outspoken against the Mussolini regime. While Matteoti was walking to Parliament for work, 5 men in a car pulled up to him and drug him struggling into the car, where they stabbed and buried a carpenter's file into his chest. Although Lauro was far from a socialist, he was a humanist at heart. and with the death of Matteoti, spurred the hatred and fire within Lauro to do all he could to oppose the fascist regime. Lauro's first act of defiance was to translate Antigone, which one of its themes was going against power to do what you believe is right. The same year in 1927 that he translated Antigone, he also wrote his own poetic work, a drama in verse, so a drama that's written in the form of poetry, ICARO, a work which would win him the Olympic silver medal in poetry. Now, ICARO was a retelling of the myth of Icarus. Here's a brief outline of the play that will show you how his life and art influenced each other. Daedalus reveals the invention of iron to Minos after demonstrating it breaking a bronze sword, and Minos is thrilled and is planning to conquer all of Greece with this new invention. When Icarus returns, Daedalus informs Icarus of this, and Icarus is upset.
Why? Why? Why?
Daedalus is portrayed as a universal man, scientist, craftsman, inventor, and whose only real concern is excellence at his craft. He has a high view of man, but a low opinion of men. His son Icarus is an ardent young poet with a vision of a new regime of peace, liberty, and love. However, also on the side, Daedalus is working in secret to build wings for him and Icarus to escape and return home, while Icarus is thinking of ways to liberate the kingdom and its people. In this version, Icarus is a poet, and the conversation about what the duties of a poet comes up.
I thought that the mission of poets was to carry the soul from our murky world to another, the world of light.
That mission and the contrary. Every poet is a messenger between the two worlds. From ours he lifts the heart to the harmonies of the aether, but from them he carries the sparks to impregnate our fertile earth. And that which is today a dream by virtue of the poet becomes a living, working force, an earthly thing, from which other poets but one day take flight towards new dreams that today do not even touch the mind.
Also during this, he has the hots for Phaedra, the princess of this kingdom, and although she respects him as a friend, she does not love him. As the play develops, Icarus begins to truly believe that the wings have an opportunity to truly cause great change within humanity, and begins to speak with great conviction about his beliefs and how he's going to achieve them.
Poet, thou speakest them images.
Poet of words I am no longer. My lyre, behold, I break it. From now onwards the wind shall be the cithara of my soul, and to their vast breathing I will harmonize my song.
And although Phaedra does not truly understand what Icarus is saying, she admires his conviction, and from that conviction, she soon gets the hots for Icarus.
Fucking poet. Mwah.
Before Icarus and Daedalus can take flight, their plot is revealed, and they're arrested in this sword fight, and Icarus is about to be thrown into the lion's den until Phaedra saves them and declares her love for him. Minos says, I can't let my daughter marry someone without status. Icarus says that his kingdom is the sky, and he will demonstrate this by flying across Greece and returning. Icarus and Phaedra kiss and announce their love for one another, and that as soon as Icarus returns, the wedding bed will be arranged and that they will be married. So after he kisses Phaedra, he says this before he takes his flight from Greece.
Grant that this flight that I consecrate be one day the common heritage of the redeemed sons of man, and if I die, may this my death seem to the living far more beautiful than any life. Father, bind on my wings.
Then, in a completely metal scene, Icarus drives a chariot off a cliff to sacrifice his horse to the gods, and jumps off the chariot right as it goes off the cliff. He flies into the sky before being attacked by eagles, which he then strangles and throws one down to Minos, proving his dominion of the sky as promised. However, as night begins to fall, and as the candles surrounding the wedding bed of Phaedra and him begin to melt, Icarus does not return. A boat is seen in the distance with Theseus and other sacrificial victims for the Minotaur arriving, and he asks Theseus if he has seen anything regarding Icarus. And this is Theseus's account of Icarus's demise.
Hermes, Hermes, the herald of the sky descends from Olympus. But it was a man. My companions all threw themselves down, prone in adoration, and I lifted my arms to the man-god, calling him, Lord of the impenetrable abysses, whoever thou art, mortal or eternal god, speak to me. And he, whirling his wings, cried, Brother, towards what port sailest thou? And I to him, towards death. He beat his wings and cried, Whither? I replied, I go to die for my country within the labyrinth of Midos. And he, Hail, brother, but do thou resist fate? This is the message of Icarus, fight. Thanatos is a beast who can be tamed. Then he gave one stroke of the wings and gazed into the sun, soaring in the west wind. He ascended toward the height like a god until he appeared to us no more than a speck in the sky.
All the characters come together in a final scene to express the virtue of the hero and champion him for his daring and his dissemination of an idea that would lead to Theseus overthrowing Minos and freeing the people, an idea that would lead to the betterment of all the characters. After winning the Olympic silver medal for Icaro and having the lessons of that play fester in his mind, he soon met at a dinner party in Rome internationally famous monologist and actress Ruth Draper. Despite the fact that the actress was 43 and Lauro was 26 at the time, their attraction to each other was almost instantaneous. This is like the Genderbent version of Leonardo DiCaprio and whoever he's seeing right now. Ruth brought her glamour and success, and Lauro brought his poetry, his ambition, and his youth. So after connecting so well on that initial meeting, they decided almost spontaneously to go on a 2-week tour of Italy with each other. And here is the Lauro De Bosis tour guide that will guarantee you having a GF by the time it is over. Over a 2-week period, they did more than 24 stops. Frascati, Arsinazzo, Villa d'Este, the most romantic gardens of Ninfa, the Panicio, and the Palatine, down the Appian Way. They attended a concert of Segovia's, a Pirandello play. There were 2 evenings of Ruth's own performance in the Teatro Odescalchi, with Lauro looking in between acts. They did sightseeing in Rome, in the Sistine Chapel. They spent time in Florence and San Miniato, the Bargello, De Impistoia, Prato, San Gimignano. Lauro and Ruth spent all this time making wonderful memories, seeing the beautiful sights within the country and within each other. On the 13th day, like any other rational man who had recently met a woman, he decided to bring Ruth to meet his mother. And his mother was so accepting of her that she would sign all future letters to Ruth as she did to her children, cara madre. When Ruth finally had to leave to continue her tour, they would write to each other constantly, and Lauro would lovingly call her my archangel. In his very first letter to Ruth, he said, I don't love anything anymore that is not in some way connected with you. What a miracle to have such a touchstone. Only a poet would have such romantic flirtation. Lauro would eventually begin work in the States as a part of the Italian-American Society and as a Harvard professor and lecturer. And although the gig was pretty good, the lessons within Icaro and his own personal ambition towards opposing fascism led him to quit his position in the Italian-American Society and return to Italy to have a more tangible effect on the hearts and minds of Italians. To become a poet that would break the lyre, Lauro returned to Italy and created the underground resistance movement Alleanza Nazionale, with a handful of like-minded men and the historian and essayist Mario Vinciguerra and Renzo Rendi. And his mother too, shout out to supportive mothers. And the organization's goal was to circulate informational pamphlets across Italy to bring a greater awareness to the dangers of fascism. So here's how the organization worked. Lauro would write chain pamphlets anonymously, his mother would copy them and cyclostyle them, and Mario and Renzo would distribute them in cities across the country to spread awareness of what fascism was really doing to their country. And as they spread their pamphlets, the fascist government began to take note. They began to think of ways to dismantle the National Alliance. Mario was caught posting a whole batch of pamphlets by fascist agents. He was arrested and was beaten so badly he lost hearing in one side of his head, and he was placed naked on a roof for a whole winter night. However, Mario never squealed. Mario was not a rat. Soon Renzo was caught afterwards and he didn't snitch either, but after catching those two, the fascist government easily closed in on the rest of the organization, and Lauro's mother was soon imprisoned. Ruth Draper was the first person to telegram Lauro about his friends and his mother. Lauro initially wanted to go back to Italy to be imprisoned in solidarity with his friends and family. However, Ruth liked the message with Icarus to Theseus in his play. She insisted that he fight, and that would be the only true way to honor them. At that moment, Lauro realized he must translate his play into reality. Lauro resolved to follow Icarus's example by flying a plane over Rome, where he would drop thousands of anti-fascist pamphlets over its people as bread is dropped on a starving city. The odds were against him, however. 1, he didn't know how to ride a motorbike, let alone a plane. 2, he didn't have a plane.
This is #1 bullshit.
And 3, the Italian skies were guarded by fast and armed Italian planes that would shoot him down easily. After asking a decorated World War I pilot his chances of success, the pilot told him that he only had a 1 in 10th chance of succeeding. However, Lauro decided that this is a fight he needed to take. In between practice of flying and working as a hotel concierge, he worked late at night composing his final story/political document that would predict how the flight would take place, what his political message was, and how he would die. He called this The Story of My Death, which was soon published in the London Sunday Times, the New York Times, and all major European newspapers. In that document, he wrote the following. I am convinced that fascism will not end unless some 20 youths sacrifice their lives to shake the spirit of Italians. While during the Risorgimento, there were youths by the thousands ready to give their lives. Today, there are very few. Why? It is not because the courage of today's youth is inferior to that of their fathers. It is that no one takes fascism seriously. Everyone, including its chiefs, believes that its end is imminent, so it would be out of proportion to give one's life for something that will crumble on its own. This is a mistake. It is necessary to die. I hope that others will follow, and I will succeed in shaking public opinion. And one training montage later, he had the navigation skills and ability to fly the plane to Rome. Before Lauro embarked on his flight, he wrote 2 letters to the most important people in his life. One to Ruth Draper, and the other to his mother. The first letter to Ruth was largely meant to calm her fears and promising her that he would return safe and sound. The second letter to his mother showed that he did not intend to return.
So that was a fucking lie.
And the reasons why he felt compelled to take this flight and fight over Rome. I do not know today if the thing will be a success or if I will end like Icarus, but you must understand that the enterprise is of a kind which would make any sacrifice worthwhile. I have thought of everything and would not have the slightest regret. It is first of all my duty because I am an Italian, then because I am the head of the Alleanza Nazionale, and am free while my 2 friends are in jail for having believed in me. And aside from the above reasons, I must confess to the joy and satisfaction I feel in having a 4th reason, inasmuch as I am the author of ICARO. I hope that no longer will they say that it was full of rhetoric. Posing as an Englishman with fake accent and all, Lauro was able to successfully acquire a plane, and with just enough gas to fulfill his goal, Lauro took his final flight. About 8 o'clock on the evening of October 3rd, 1931, Romans who were sitting at outdoor cafes in the Villa Borghese or the Pinizio, or strolling in the Piazza de Spagna, suddenly saw falling from the sky small white leaflets. They whitened the green lawns and hedges of the Quirinal gardens, and at some points they fell so thickly that it seemed snow had fallen. The leaflets, addressed to the king and the Italian people, called on them to reject the fascist regime. The red plane that dropped them circled low, very low, over the center of the town and Piazza Venezia, where Mussolini was sitting in council. So low that when it reached the Piazza di Spagna, it almost seemed to be climbing up the Spanish steps. For about half an hour, it continued to hover over the city. Then the plane rose rapidly and disappeared into the western sky. Lauro's body was never found, but like Icarus, we can assume that his plane had crashed into the water.
Is Rome worth one good man's life? We believed it once. Make us believe it again.
You may be thinking to yourself, wow, that was a pointless political gesture, or the whole situation seems like it wouldn't have that much of an effect. Although we can never truly measure the effect of Lauro De Bosis' flight on galvanizing the Italian people to resist fascism, I think we can still understand why Lauro De Bosis did what he did if we consider the one true poem in ICARO written and recited by Icarus himself.
Waves of the sea, free and warlike, wandering tumultuous with joyous vigor, blue as the eyes of the siren, fervid as flames of pleasure. Sisters of my heart, I gaze upon you with intent eyes, an envious lover. Daughters of the sea and of the winds, one single instant is enough for your desire. Between birth and death, one single harmonious impulse guides your mad flight. Brief syllables of an immense chorus, for this you die and feel no sorrow. Divine is the song, and though it be cruel and vain, still the waves throw themselves into it joyously, carrying only to carry afar the impetuous force with which each one is filled. Such at times seems to me the destiny of men on earth, unconscious syllables of a great melody. Is there anyone who hears it? And the world revolves, and the sea is never still.
Reading this poem combined with Lauro's life story, I feel a great deal of comfort and joy from it. I know it's not the best poem, even by Lauro's admission. It's a bit dated, but it still has a truth in it that I think that is worthwhile. That we, like the winds and waves, should be true to ourselves and live and pursue those desires that we believe in. From the many lessons of Lauro De Bosis' life story, I think we should take away two things. One, that there is a beauty and power of words, but sometimes they alone are insufficient, and action must be taken to bring the words to life. Only the ideas we act upon matter, and we must not only speak in beautiful and thoughtful words, but we must speak in images, in action. The liars set aside to unencumber our hands. The second is that we have a duty to keep the ideas that we value, that were brought by those we admire, alive. The multi-talented playwright Artaud once wrote, "Actors should be like martyrs burnt alive, still signaling to us from their stakes," making Lauro not only a poet, but an actor, and that he was able to channel Icarus, and that he took significant action. I believe not only is Lauro's fire signaling to us still through his act of bravery, but also Ruth's, Mario's, Renzo's, Giacomo's, Gaetano's, and all the Italians worked to create a better world, all who worked to create a better future. Ruth never let Lauro's flame burn out, and she herself translated ICARO into English and aided in its publication so that you would be able to hear Lauro's tale now, which no doubt required a lot of inner strength. Now to Lauro himself, fly high, Sky King. May your and others' examples burn and light the way like a Promethean flame. Thank you for watching Poetry Taught Poorly. If you liked what you saw, please consider liking and subscribing. Do you think Lauro's life could make a good movie? Sorry for any delay. was dealing with family things in the holidays and a sickness. So thank you again for your patience, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.